Welcome back to the next episode of the Clearly Crucial podcast. My name is Jesse, and you're seeing a little bit of a different side of me today. That's totally fine, just some technical difficulties, but that's not going to stop us from talking to my next guest here, Lucia. How is it going?
Hi, Jesse. How are you? Thanks for having me.
I'm doing well. And for those of you who don't know, Lucia and I go a couple of years back. We really got close working together at a couple of different points, and so we share a lot of the same love and interest for business and systems. And actually, we both have a background in the environmental field. For me, as some of you may know, I got my first start in working in a medical office, dermatology specifically, and I started running the lab. And that's where I got my first experience into what it meant to run processes and dictate people and also manage resources too. Lucia, can you give us a little bit of background of your experience in the environmental and scientific field?
Yeah, sure thing, Jesse. So I studied in university environmental engineering, which is something that I'm still really passionate about, although I don't work in that field anymore. But
Right.
I truly love it. It's a way for me to feel connected to everything. I call nature God because for me, that's basically the expression of what God is, right? Of perfection. So for me, taking care when I started looking into what I wanted to study and the impact that I wanted to have in the world. Of course, everything going on with the environment right now, and I'm guessing you're all familiar with global warming and all of that. So I immediately ran to that career, and ever since then, I always been the crazy green girl in my family,
Yeah.
always opting for recycling, opting for this. And talking about recycling, I specialize in waste management, which some people might think it's weird, but I really like the fact that you can do a lot with waste, both liquid and solid. So
Yeah.
that was the turnaround that dictated where I wanted to do and where I also saw that I could do the most impact.
Yes, and before you guys turn off the podcast thinking, "What is this?" I'm used to listening to people talk about business and online. Trust me, we'll get there. Lucy and I neither of us work in this field anymore, but the reason we're having this conversation is I believe there's a lot of really important parallels when it comes to the word waste. Because what does waste mean really? It just means a production or lack of production of something that's important. And so what we're going to talk about today is really a lot of parallels of what works in the physical world versus how you can apply those same concepts to the business world as well, whether you're online or offline. So thank you for giving us that introduction as well, Lucia. So I wanted to kind of ask you, you know, you mentioned a lot of great topics there, but I want to really know more about your journey as well. You mentioned you have this passion for, the environment and as well as just really doing well for the world in the world. And I wanted to ask you, like, what was it that kind of brought you on that path to really caring about this area of really making the most out of the resources that we have?
So, well, I'm from Guatemala, so it's a third world country where there is a lot of injustice, especially in the environmental area. You might think like, well, there's a lot of injustice in a lot of factors, but when you manage correctly land and fields and crops and water and waste and all of that, sometimes that gets left aside. And when you have contaminated water, for example, your crops cannot grow properly, or you will find more diseases in people. So actually, for me, it's one of the main issues right now where if you cannot contain your waste, for example, if you don't have a correct line field that uh, the waste I don't know the names in English, sorry
That's
about
okay.
this, but when waste starts to decompose, they generate liquid, right? So all those
Mm.
liquids are really toxic when they are all packed together, and they go into the water, they go into land, they go into soil, and then a lot of diseases come up with it, a lot of contamination. So that triggers a lot of the issues that we currently have, especially in Guatemala, which is a lot of malnourished children, a lot
Mm.
of problem with crops, a lot of problems with water. People don't have access to drinkable water because the water that they have is really contaminated at the end. So when I veered, or I turned myself into waste management, that was the main focus, to actually make an impact into changing at least a little part of the country where I live in, which I do feel like there's a lot of opportunity to work on.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you for sharing that. I couldn't give a better example for the importance of why managing the resource that you have, in this case, different waste, is important, because it literally affects the lives and well-being of other people. And you've seen that firsthand in Guatemala. So I can definitely understand that. Tell me a little bit about really learning about, having a drive to help people, as it sounds like to me like where that came from, but also then entering into this world of, hey, like, how do we as a country and as a world use our resources, and how can we better that? Like, what were some of the biggest aha moments that you kind of realized were, oh, this is an area that is actually really important, and if we applied this across the board, we could see some real change? Like, what were some of those biggest moments for you?
So I started working, well, as an engineer, I worked in different areas of the environmental engineer, but the one that I can tell you was the aha moment was when I started working, actually was on sales, nothing to do with environment, but the actual corporation was related to environmental engineering and waste management.
Okay.
And the owner was the one who kept saying, there's a lot of money in waste. There's a lot of money in waste, and we started going into big corporations like I don't want to say names, but like big
Sure.
brands, big brands,
Brands you might
and
know.
brands you might know and that you might drink and that you might enjoy. And when you got into the factories and everything, people were so wasteful, and where you couldn't see, or the big boss or the manager couldn't see that they were actually losing money. They were losing money because they were losing energy, for example. They were losing money because they were wasting water. They were losing money because they had a lot of waste in terms of product, right? They have like a percentage that they can waste, so they were wasting it, and that costs money. And when you go the other way around, how much of that product, or how much of that, let's say, is fiber of some sort that you use for production, right? That fiber took someone the time to create, and that fiber came from something that took time to create. So at the end, if you're wasting not only your money, but you're also wasting the other chain of production, because you're actually just letting it go to the landfill. So that was like the moment where I say, okay, yeah, there's a lot of impact that I can do here, because a lot of this is not being used, but it can actually be used. And that was also the our gateway into big corporations. Like, hey, you're wasting money, man. Like that's one of the main things, right? Who wants to lose money? And it's on the simple things, like you wouldn't guess, but let's say you have to refrigerate food, but when you close your doors, there's a little leakage, and you're losing energy. So you have to go with a pretty cool things that you use at the end, but you see, oh yeah, there is the leak, and then you seal it, and then everything works normal again. So it's on the simple things, and that was wasting energy. So at the end, and you've heard me now, I've said wasting energy, wasting resources, because everything is a resource that comes from Earth, and you can actually take advantage of it if you use it in the proper way.
Yeah, and thank you for going through a lot of those examples too. I think there's two really key things there. I'll just talk about the thing you mentioned, which is sometimes the waste is so imperceptible in the moment that you can overlook it, like just a door, like a refrigerator door not quite closing properly. But if you look at the impact of something like that over a week, a month, a year, 10 years, then all of a sudden we're looking at orders of energy, not to mention probably waste of food that's gone bad that didn't have to, over a longer period of time, that can really make a difference. And I assume that that's a lot of what you speak to these larger corporations about. It's like, hey, there are small things happening right now, sometimes big, sometimes small, but even at least small things happening that can have a big impact as well.
Yeah.
And I want to highlight how not all of those things are tangible. A lot of those things are intangible waste. And this is the thing that I see in online business as well, is waste is cost. Like when it comes down to it, waste means, this is what I was trying to say earlier. Waste means something that could have been productive is not. And that's one of my biggest pet peeves too, is like, yes, we can always do better in a lot of different areas. Yes, we can always do this. But if someone is actively doing something that's creating waste when it could be creating something productive, there's no need for that, right? And you mentioned this has costs with like money, time, product, energy, all those different things add up, and they have an impact on the world, but they also have an impact on the company as well. And so for you, like, what would be some of those examples of the intangible waste products that could be applied to other kinds of industries and business as well? Like you mentioned, people wasting parts of chain of command and probably spending more time in some areas because of that extra waste. Can you give any examples there?
Yeah, so let's say there's a big factory, and this is an example I'm especially thinking about, where you have, I don't know, 100 people, let's say,
Mhm.
to do a job. But you see that those 100 people out of the 100, maybe 75 are actually doing their job, because one is, well, he went out for a smoke, and then the other one went out to do this and this and this. So at the end, I'm not saying you should overwork your people, by no
Sure.
means, but when you manage your time correctly, and when you know what you hired someone to do, you will be less wasteful, and that person will be more focused. That also comes
Mhm.
with the fact that you need to be incentivized. Of course, if you're not incentivized, you're not gonna love your work. So that also something that you see, like, people were feeling like, okay, I cannot grow in here, so I'm gonna slack off.
So why bother?
So why
Yeah.
bother?
That's a really interesting thing that I hadn't thought about, but it's true that this is why incentivizing your people as much as possible is important, because if you don't, often waste is a byproduct of disengagement. Would you agree?
Yeah, definitely. And like I was mentioning earlier, big corporations or food chains and drink chains and all of that, they have already, like, out of the 100 of production, a percentage they already know that will be waste.
Mm,
So people are
yeah,
smart, like, you
they
wouldn't
know it's
figure,
accounted
but
for.
they know that uh that 35% I can waste it, so I can leave everything open, and I don't have to take a look at my chain of production, because I know that this 35, so I can go take my smoke with it while I'm just slacking off,
Yeah,
and this is being wasted, right?
yeah.
So
Now I
there's
want to
a lot
speak to
of
that.
things there.
Yeah, no, I want to speak to that really quickly because I know the thought process. There's a lot of times when you're running an operation in business or in medical or what have you, where it's okay to make certain compromises because of quote unquote efficiency, or like there's certain thresholds that you have to meet. If you don't meet the threshold, then a little bit of waste in a different area doesn't actually impact the outcome. And that's sometimes the case and sometimes not. And so this is where I want to talk about clarity a little bit, because where do we draw the line, right? Like where is the line drawn between what matters and what doesn't? And the different levels of understanding expertise help with the knowledge of how to do that. And so can you talk a little bit about how you help or you helped these different companies understand clearly the areas of waste that are acceptable versus unacceptable, especially on the impacts that it has on the business and the environment as a whole? Like how have you seen and used clarity to portray that message?
So let's keep the same company, right? The example that we've been running across. It's acceptable to have that 35% if that 35% is faulty. If there was something wrong with production, if I know that some big factories, you can not even have earrings, not even have makeup on, and let's say somebody dropped an earring because that day they went with an earring, that whole batch has to be thrown, because you
Mm,
cannot afford for a person to open their bag of chips and actually eat an earring, right? That's
Right.
understandable by some means, because it will affect the whole batch, right? It will affect the reputation of the company. So that is okay. What is not okay is the other example that I was setting, like, hey, I know that I can waste. So why not leave it open, right? I'm bored. I don't want to do this. I hate my job. I'm gonna go for a smoke, and I leave it running. So that is what is unacceptable. Human, not mistake, but actually thinking of committing that waste. That is something that is unacceptable, at least what we try to show. Also something, and we were talking about this before starting, was the circular economy, which is where all this runs through, right? It's acceptable to have that waste. What is waste, quote unquote, because it always can be used. What it's unacceptable is to actually throw it into a landfill without being treated, for example.
Yes. That's a big issue
So
sometimes.
yeah, so yeah, you will have waste, you will have let's say we're talking about chips, so that earring felt in, you have to dispose of those chips. But what are you gonna do? Are you gonna throw it into a landfill, or are you gonna make I don't know, there's a lot of different things that you can do with it, but what we tried to implement was creating animal food. So instead of that being wasteful and being thrown into the landfill, we bought it from them and we made animal food with it.
I see.
Because
So finding an
if you
alternative to
finding
the
a government,
waste, because you still have a hazard potential for people, but I'm sure you go through different ways to make that safe, but also knowing that there's a lower risk when you're talking about that alternative means that maybe it's not as efficient as it could have been, but what you're looking at is, well, either we use it or we don't. So how can we use it to still utilize the resource? Is that what you're saying?
yeah, yeah, totally. And I think one of the I know I should be a vegetarian with my with my choice of career, but I actually learned a lot of that production. And the best example I can give you, it's actually a cow. We use
Mm-hmm.
absolutely everything from a cow. You don't waste
Okay.
anything from a cow because it's really expensive to raise them, and to have
Mm-hmm.
cows is really expensive. So we use the leather, we use even the eyelashes. Some of the fake eyelashes
No
are made from
way.
cow eyelashes. Yeah.
Oh,
We use the
the
hair, we
Cosmo girls are
use
gonna come after
everything.
you knowing that their fake eyelashes are actually cow eyelashes. I've
That's
never
some
heard
of
of that
them.
before.
Some of them are synthetic, but the other ones, some are from animals. And we use the
That's
bone,
something.
we use everything, we use the blood. Like, we don't waste anything from a cow because it's expensive to produce one.
Mm.
But that's just one example. But we shouldn't be producing waste, because that's the faulty design in what we created. It was
Yes, yes. So
lazy.
this is something that I want to talk about in depth because we've mentioned this a couple times before recording, and I think it's really interesting. Before we dive into that, I wanted to just highlight how your example with a cow is really good because in business there's oftentimes where there are really expensive things that we misuse, like for example, like I'll just give a quick example. Like let's say you have a marketing budget, right? Like that is the end, that is the beginning of the engine of your sales machine. And if you're, as for a very quick example in my world, one of the biggest problems when you're utilizing a marketing budget effectively is data tracking, because in the digital world everything is tracked. But if you don't have the the frameworks and the systems to really say, okay, well, we put this many dollars into this was how many clicks we got, this how many impressions, this is the kind of results that were driven from these exact data points, well, then you're missing information there that can really play into the decisions that you make, go on, so on and so forth. And I would define that as waste. I would say that if there is missed opportunity as a result of faulty data or faulty process, that is wasted. It is wasted because it could have been a better opportunity, not just because we created something that is no longer valuable, but there is missed opportunity as well. So it covers both sides of the spectrum. But what you're getting into is something I really enjoy too, because on the flip side, like let's say that you have an onboarding process. You and I have both been a part of this before, where where this didn't happen in this case, but let's say you have a great person you want to bring into your organization, and you bring them in, you're like, okay, great. And the process that you got in place is so terrible or like so insufficient that it makes the person not even want to work there anymore. Well, if they leave, that is wasted potential that is walking out your door, when really taking the time to say, hey, okay, well, how are we making sure we don't waste the the kind of talent that we've got with us as well? Because it can be money and product and time as well, but it can also be potential. And so there's a lot of stuff there that's really important to make sure we're saying, okay, how do we maximize what we have and not waste for unnecessary reasons, really? And so tell me a little bit more about the really the concept of waste. Like when we create something that's no longer usable. I'll let you go into it, but you had a really great thought on what that really looks like, especially in our human conception.
So there is this new current, well, I keep telling you new because everything used to be really from the 20s. But this current started in the late 80s where, well, I've mentioned it a couple of minutes ago. It's about circular economy.
Mm-hmm.
But that developed another current where it talks about how waste is actually a defect in design by human, because if you go into nature, there isn't anything wasted. If you die and you let yourself in a field, your energy will be or will serve to produce something else. There will be some microbiota that will be eating you up and will be producing more energy, and that will produce something else. So actually, on a natural level or a real level, waste was invented by humans. We are the only ones that waste something. And you will say, well, yeah, but I haven't seen a lion eat the whole carcass. Yeah, they don't eat it whole, but then they leave the bones for, then there goes a vulture that eats something else, and then nature does its thing, and that energy keeps moving. So with that in mind, that's where circular economy ties to tie. There's a lot of countries that do this. Germany is really good at doing this. Norway,
No way. Yeah, you're good.
is really good at doing this. Too, they even set like their factories close together where someone produces one waste and enters the main line for the other
Yes,
one.
proximity. That's a good example. Eliminating the waste of transportation by putting things closer together.
Yeah. So everything at the end, if you feel like, I don't know, it has to come in a wrapper, like for example, this headset, right? They come in this big box and a wrapper and some extra plastic, and you're like, why? Why do I need this? Like, that's a default on, or that's a mistake with the design, which is, this ties in with, there's environmental design, and then there's environmental engineer. So there's a lot of different branches that this can go into. But I really like the concept that actually there isn't any trash or waste. You can always use it. There's always something to be done with it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, that's a huge thing. Yeah, whenever I see like an apple wrapped in plastic wrap at the store, I'm like, hold on, what's going on here? And I think that little mindset shift is really the biggest thing that I think people can take away from this, is just question the waste around you. Because I think I'd never, even having been a part of medical waste and all that kind of stuff, and seeing how it gone, I never thought about waste being a human made thing. But it's right, there are no natural landfills. Like even if one animal or one microbiota doesn't take care of everything, it's the combination of all things working together. And I think that's really what's going to be the solution for us as well. We all have different skill sets and different tools and skill and ways of handling things. And if we all just take that little check, say, hey, is this necessary? Like, do we have to do this? Are we creating something that we don't need to create? Or are we missing out on something that could be better, that eliminates some waste that we hadn't even thought of before. And that can go as far as, there was the piece of trash that you would normally put in the trash, put it in the recycling, but it can also go as far as, hey, like it takes X person, 30 minutes to take care of this activity. Well, why don't we take a look at that? Maybe they could do it faster. Maybe they're doing some double work there where that would be considered waste of time, energy, and resources because you're paying that person too. And so that's what, for me, I think was the biggest thing is just having the second look, so having the intention of making the best out of what you have and what you're doing. Would you agree?
Yeah, definitely. And talking about, I just got this, I remember something, I think again is in Norway, because they're so efficient. And I think that's the key word here, efficiency in all levels, right?
Yeah.
They're so efficient in what they do that even the working hours are less because they
Yes.
know that people can actually achieve their things without being on their desk all day. They're actually more efficient throughout the week because they get to see their family more, they get to do this, they get to go out instead of being stuck in traffic, instead of being stuck in a desk. That took time, of course. It didn't happen today and night, but it also shows you that you can be efficient without being like, sometimes there I see people like they when I started being an entrepreneur, they were like, yeah, but you're wasting your time because you are not waking up early and getting back home at 6 p.m. And I'm like, well, I'm not wasting my time because I'm managing it correctly, and I know I can do my things in 3 hours and then spend the rest of the day with my family.
Yeah.
Does
And
that
with
make
that
me lazy?
example, what's the waste, right? Are you wasting time or are they wasting their time spending more time inefficiently? That's
Exactly.
the question,
So
right?
I think when you said it's one of your main pet peeves, I think that immediately clicked my mind because I
Yeah.
think it is mine too. Seeing that people don't do something because they are so used to doing the same thing over and over and over again without trying to actually, now there's so many apps. you can
Yeah.
track your time, you can track everything and see also what you're doing, where you can actually improve, and see that you can actually spend time reading that book that you wanted or spending time with your family because you actually were wasting so much more time doing some other stuff.
100%. And you can't do any of that until you have clarity on how you are spending your time. What are the results of what you're spending your time on? And the drive to say, hey, let's shake it up. Maybe let's try something new. Because at the end of the day, that's all any of the best self-help books are. Is it someone sat down and decided, hey, I'm going to figure this out. And they did. So if you can get that information from a book or a mentor, or just figure it out yourself, finding a way to live your best, most efficient, productive, but also, just most satisfactory life possible, whether it's business or life. Because I would say that, this is a bit of a deeper level. Um, People spend their whole lives chasing a career, doing exactly what you're talking about, and then they get to the end of 30 years, they retire early, and they think, "Oh, should I have done all that? Was that worth it?" And I can't think of a better example of waste than a wasted few decades, a wasted opportunity of life, doing something that was apart from what you actually were driven toward. So I think that's a lot of different things to think about too. So I told you all we would go from waste management with recycling environment all the way through to how you manage the waste in your own life and everything in between. So thank you, Lucia, for joining me today. That was a really fun, interesting conversation. It was a little bit different today, but I think it was really fun and valuable. And like I said, everybody, we'll be back in a couple of weeks. We'll talk about a couple of different subjects, but take some time to really think about what we went through today. Again, Lucia, thanks for coming out, and we'll see you all again in a couple of weeks. Take care.